In the book Flow by psychologist Csikszentmihalyi, he said that one of the main forces that affects consciousness adversely is information that conflicts with existing intentions or distracts us from carrying them out. So the likelihood of you writing your book or making any positive creative change for that matter dwindles to nothing if your mind is filled with thinking that opposes your goal. I'm Frank, editor of One Black Perch Publishing, and this is part one of a series of videos sharing parts of the first iteration of our self-care journal for writers. The next iteration is being updated, but I just wanted to set out some key points from the first version, just in case you happen to need it. So the book Flow is one of the references that I used in the self-care journal, and it was recommended to me a couple of years ago. Remains one of my favorite books. The subtitle is The Psychology of Optimal Experience, and most of us, we prioritize productivity so much, and we try to get into a prime mind state for work or performance of some kind. And its flow is mostly understood in sports terms as being in the zone, but just to be clear, flow can be experienced while enjoying art or at a live sporting event or in meditation, so it's not always due to some strenuous physical exertion or something like that. He goes on to say that your beliefs are nothing more than psychic information, and so if your self-belief or the information that you hold on to about yourself are things like I'm not a real writer or I waited too late to take writing serious, these can sound like just typical doubts to overcome, but it's actually more than that. It's inner dialogue, is scripting that's part of your experience. It's sometimes it's called negative self-talk, and over time that can wear on you, that negative self-talk. Prolonged experience of this kind can weaken the self to the point that it is no longer able to invest attention or pursue its goals. Think of what he calls the self as your creative spirit. I don't know if the creative spirit can die, but the inability to invest attention and pursue your intentions sounds like death to me, or a certain kind of death. But at best, you end up in a severely weakened state. The first exercises are to trace any inhibiting thoughts that conflict with your intentions or distract you from them, or the thoughts that weaken your creative spirit into being latent or shut down. So you ask questions like, what's kept you apprehensive or second guessing whether to commit to your writing self? You can make a list of reasons why you became apprehensive, or tell the stories that illustrate how you landed at reluctance or shrinking or deprioritizing your creative self. There are common ones that we all sort of run into, and not every single circumstance is an excuse, but some reasons are valid, but they become traps that we stay locked in long after they're relevant. Then we retell them to ourselves over and over again, telling ourselves why you can't escape, why you can't heal, why you can't get to writing, why you can't become someone different with a different story. It might trace back to early experiences as a student or from attitudes you picked up during your upbringing about creative careers. Our world is designed in such a way that there are more people pursuing their creative goals, and there are creative ways of doing things a lot now, but we're still being guided towards more professional tracks that cut off pieces of our creative self. The part we play in allowing that to happen is one of the many reasons why would-be creatives, and not just writers, carry guilt and shame as it concerns their creative self. And in the book of Forgiving, written by Desmond Tutu and his daughter, Dr. Fo Tutu, they talk at length about the process of forgiving others, which is a necessary skill, but toward the end of the book, they talk about self-forgiveness, and they center guilt and shame as having done harm to yourself. Even if that harm is solely psychic or emotional, it still has real consequences and does real damage, like your book never coming out, or you never sitting down to try writing it, or making whatever other life change that that applies to. They write that since feelings of guilt come from specific things that we've done or not done, they can only be resolved by taking action. So intentional corrective doing. A lot of times it's the guilt of knowing better, knowing that you have a creative charge that has stayed lit, or even if it's barely lit, over years and have done nothing with it. Almost like doing an injustice to something you've been given. How often do you sit in your shoulda, woulda, couldas? Stewing, brewing, mentally punishing yourself with nostalgic creative memory that's probably better used for more productive ends. According to the Tutu, shame is a bit different. Shame is a bit trickier to identify than guilt. Unlike guilt, shame is a feeling associated with being rather than doing. When I feel ashamed, it means I feel there isn't just something wrong with what I've done, there is something wrong with who I am. Shame is often a hidden emotion and it can be paralyzing in its power. It makes us small, it makes us want to hide because we believe we're not worthy of belonging to the community or to the world. The first section of the journal is devoted to reframing the story you tell yourself about what you can do. It's meant to be your companion while you work through your first draft because it's important to have positive messaging reinforced over and over again, especially at the very beginning. So shame is in the way of that, and reminding yourself of your intentions and how you unseat it from your mind. So what, you never shared your writing before? Another common trait of a guilt-ridden would-be writer is that the weight of guilt is usually just as heavy as the stories you already want to tell. That's why action is the response, the proper response. It balances out the equation, at least until you start getting more ideas. To quote the Tutus again about resolving shame, they said, be of service and help others. Remember, you can only heal shame in connection with others, and when you connect with others, your compassion increases. And when you feel compassion for yourself, it's more easy to be forgiving of yourself and your past behavior. Some writers resonate with feeling a sense of duty or responsibility, depending on how they came to view the power of writing to change or affect things, thinking of writing as a service, despite the many attacks against the right to do it and the threats against them for the right to tell true stories or fictional. So yeah, it can be a duty if you want to see it that way, but to pick up that mantle of service, you got to put down the shame that you let shield you from it for so long. When was the first time you thought about writing a book, or a particular book, a series of stories, or poems, or comics? Or the first time you were told you had a gift for writing and that you should be a writer? Was there a book that made you think, I could be a writer after having read it? What poets inspired you to put down your first stanzas? Take some time to tell yourself those stories. List those names and list the titles. Write about the writing assignments that you had when you were a kid, or the story that you shared as part of a writing group, or that piece that you spit at an open mic. Maybe it's the only thing that stayed with you for years if you're somebody that takes really long breaks from writing. It's time for you to let it spill out and create that positive loop and strengthen your creative self instead of being weakened by inaction or atrophy to entropy. To reconnect with your creative self again, you're going to need memories that realign you with the satisfaction of having completed your book. Voicing it all is how you put it there. It's easy to forget when you see the seeds of good in your backstory, no matter what the weight of inaction you used to carry. We thrive when we press forward in alignment with our most creative self, with our most generous self. And for you to be generous to your eventual readers, it starts with you being generous to you. So the next part, we'll meditate on compassion and acceptance while writing through the first chapter or two of your first draft, or the first few poems if you're a poet. Like and share this with your writer friends.